severe drought. So we're not far from being in a more severe drought. Next slide. This is the captured yesterday from the USGS National Water Dashboard. And the link is there if you guys would ever want to keep a track of it yourself. But if you notice, the circle areas is our surrounding areas. Warren County, it's, I think Winchester is in the center there. And what I'm trying to show in the circle over there is that the orange and the dark red are in, I don't know if you guys know what a normal bell curve is. We are in 10% or less on the bell curve. That's how low our water is. We are not in the medium, we're not even close to the medium range. And this one dark red, bright red one, that is, it's off the bell curve on statistics on being low. So we are currently, you can see it's regionally. There's only one green dot over closer to DC, but regionally we are very, very dry. And this has an impact on your groundwater levels and your runoff. Next slide, please. So I had to do a lot of digging around on the USGS site. I've contacted the Virginia Geological Survey. I've contacted James Madison University professors to get us some assistance. And this is from a 2005 water study, and it was the last time that the USGS looked at Frederick County. And there's a 2010 report that is also very, very good. The USGS did on Warren County, and it also shows very similar things. But this is one site in Clark County, Brandy Farm, which is not far from Frederick County. And it's basically doing a historical. This is actually your water curve, and what it's showing is the average, the low, and the high. But what you can see is that during non-drought periods, the groundwater levels is about 25 feet. When you get down into the drought periods, you drop your groundwater level over 20 feet. So the groundwater level is 20 feet lower, and I have heard people, I talked to a driller getting a well drilled on the farm, and he said he had somebody that he drilled not far from Brandy Farm, he drilled a well for. The water was at 65 foot, and then when they went to put the well pump in, it was down at 120. It had dropped 60 feet. So that's a huge groundwater level drop. Next slide. So where do you get your water from? So basically, you have a lot of water wells. I couldn't get hold of a decent well database. The county doesn't really make that available. But from the report, you're going to be getting your water for residential wells is going to be, you're going to drill a well that's maybe down to 300 feet, maybe down to 600 feet, depending on where you are. But you're going to be dependent upon faults, fractures, and bedding planes because the rock that you have has no porosity and permeability. And I'll go on the next slide, we'll show that better. The average water rate, according to some information I found on the web, is probably 3 to 5 gallons per hour for the average well in the county. There are some exceptions. I was looking at the USGS report that was 2005. They had some 1,000-gallon an hour wells, but those were exceptions. Those were drilled along. They were down to 900 feet. They had drilled along a strike slip fault where you have more porosity and permeability along the strike slip fault. The other place that you get your water from are vacated quarries. And so basically what happens is the runoff runs into the quarries. And that we need to have more of those because the problem, I'll explain that later. So you've got a Stevens City quarry reservoir, and then you have a Clearbrook quarry reservoir that they have water treatment plants associated. The biggest one that I know of where you get your water from in the county and in the city is the Percy D. Miller Water Treatment Plant. It's in Warren County, and matter of fact, that picture over there is a picture of the water intake dam. It's on my farm. It's across the water from me. The water comes from the North Fork of the Shenandoah River, It has the ability to do a 10 million gallon a day intake, but the water intake is going to be limited, restricted when we're in drought. The other thing is, the reason why I'm mentioning this is from what I understand, one of the data rooms want to take water from here and then have it go export it, out in Clark County, is what I've heard about. I'm not 100% certain. And then you also have a lot of draw on the North Fork. There's upstream town, Strasburg. You've got all the towns upstream that take water from the North Fork. Now, in 2024, the City of Winchester proposed capital improvements to address reservoir initiative. Funds for this reservoir and upgrades to the Shenandoah River water intake and treatment plant are $75 million. I'm like, what are they spending money on? I know they need to fix my side, but that's a lot of money to be spending. Next slide. So here we're getting into the rocks, the fun bit. This is my favorite bit, right? So if you were looking for an ideal aquifer, you would have these sand grains with space in between where the blue bit is your water, right? And water flows through it. And we don't have that. We have rocks that are anywhere from 500 to 200 million years old that have been through 3 mountain buildings. And the type of rock that they are mostly the limestone, Martinsburg shale and the Beekman limestones and the different limestones that you have. They're all very fine-grained micrites, and they don't have any porosity in them. This is solid. There's no water in the rock. The only way that you get water in the rock is that you have a diagram up there of fractures and faults and caves and bedding planes. So when you have the contact between different beds, there's usually a place that water can creep through. So I call this a tight, diffuse aquifer because it doesn't hold any volume. And when the rain comes in, it has to filter into these cracks. So it has no porosity, no permeability. And I have the local sedimentary column over here, which is, you can see, well, it's hard to see because it's kind of blurry on this, but you're basically going from Cambrian to Ordovician up there. And like I said, it's very old, tight rock. The water volume is confined to the joints and fractures and faults in the bedding planes and the caves. The springs are associated with larger thrust faults or strike slip faults. Water retention is poor. You have very strong clay soil here, as you all will know. The limestone makes a kind of a red-orange clay, and the Martinsburg shale makes a kind of a yellow clay soil. And these aquifers are recharged by precipitation and discharged into streams. So it's going to soak in a little, but it's going to run off. And that's the reason why having these quarries to collect your water are important. Covering the land with extensive development limits recharge. Right? You cover it with cement and pavement, you're not going to be feeding the aquifer. Next slide. So this is from the 2005 report. It's a limited cross-section across the county. It's through this bit right here is that cross-section up there. And what I really want to show you here is they consider most of the water comes out of the limestone. That's 25% of the county. And of course, Winchester is like right up in here, so we know how much of the limestone is being covered right now by Winchester. And so, yeah, the carbonate aquifer basically is supposed to have the rain come from here, fill into the aquifer, which is low, and then you're going to be damming against the Martinsburg shale, which represents there. So what you see here is that in this cross-section, these beds are standing straight up, right? When you get into the limestone section, you've got what's called a syncline. It bends down, and then you arc up, that's an anticline, and then you run against the Martinsburg shale, which is all vertical. So the little blue arrows represent the kind of recharge that you can see that they've put into this report. And it doesn't go very deep because the rock's tight. And you're going to have limited spaces. The other thing that you have to think about here is pressure. How are you going to get water flowing through this? And so basically, I wanted to say, you've got tight rock, you've got fractures, you've got limited places to put the water, and it's not really a place to be putting a data center. You haven't got the water. And that's the end of my conclusion.
So are there any questions for Martha? We're going to take just a couple before we move on to Nathan. I see one right here. Oh, hold on one sec, sir, if you don't mind.
Hello, thank you. So given this geology, what are the chances, one, that they can even get what they need where they build? And if they do, from how large of an area will they impact the water supply?
I think, well, like one of the best wells in the county was drilled to 900 feet and it made 1,000 gallons an hour. That's 12,000, that's 24,000 a day. If they need millions a day, you're not going to be making it. It just isn't going to happen. The only place to get it is out of the river. And when we're in a drought, the government controls on how much water you can get out of the river. That's going to be the only way.
And so for how wide of an area would they draw water? So how large of an impact area would they have if they're pulling water out of the ground?
I haven't got any statistical studies on it like these ladies would, but I would imagine it's going to be huge. And the other thing to remind everybody of, when you're talking about limestone, you're talking about karst topography, meaning all our interface with it. We have caves, we've got sinkholes, we have all of that stuff. You starve that stuff with water, you kill a cave. It will collapse on you, right? So, I just don't see how you can have the water. I mean, the one exceptional well that made that kind of thing was drilled on like a strike slip fault through here. And like I said, that was an exceptional circumstance. That is not an everyday well. A 3 to 5 gallon, even a 25 gallon a day well, hour well, is not going to even come close to what they need.
Thank you, Martha. Any other questions that we have? While I'm walking over to this gentleman, I'll point out today there was a great article that just came out. So about the Potomac River is now the most endangered river in the United States of America. So, and it's all around data centers. I don't know why this one's really intended.
Okay, I'm going to try to be as accurate as I can with what I got. So they're getting ready to do the turn in the application for the Virginia Technology Park just the other day. And I'm 3 miles from that, but I'm 1 mile from the quarry. So from what I gather, the quarry is going to be what feeds the Virginia Technology Park. And so when I got my well drilled, it was 540 feet, 2 gallons a minute, and that's all we could get. So what I gather is probably the water, in the aquifer is going, it's all going to the quarry. But then we'll be feeding the quarry over to the technology park, and then and it'll be feeding everybody else too. And then, of what I gather, the water then will be going over to the quarry, back into the quarry, the runoff, and which will cause more dirty water and everything. And so 2 gallons a minute, that's all I can get at 540 feet. So we know we got some trouble.
Yeah. I don't know if that would feed my grandkids slip and slide. All right, well, thank you very much, Martha. Greatly appreciate it. We'll actually hit more questions here shortly. Thank you very much. what we're gonna do next